Hello everyone and welcome to another video. This time I'm going to talk about infinite lists. So a lot of times you're going to run into scenarios where you have a TV grid or some kind of guide data that's like 7 days long, and you're like, how do I do it so that it's performant, um, and maybe changing channels, etc. How do we build that? So here I kind of showing an example of how it works, and I have an example. It's not fully working, but I leave those tidbits to the viewer to kind of solve all the pieces. But I will be updating the Solid demo app with this infinite example. And so what I did was I took all the TMDB data. So there was like 5 rows I was getting. So there's 140 items in this infinite item list. And I'll go through the code in a minute. But essentially now I'm going to press right, and it's going to switch items. So you see it's moving off screen, it's fading that item out, and then it's adding the next item. And I can go all the way on and on and on and on and on. And the cool part is, like, I put a log here on the create element, and no new elements are being created down here. So it's reusing the previous items. So this is really performant, and you're not going to create a whole bunch of nodes and delete nodes every time. And this is a little different than lazy up, because like lazy up, what you would do is it would create 7, and then as you press right, it adds one more. And in this case, it's not doing that. It's just reusing the same items. And so in the case where you have a large amount of items, this might be the better choice. And in fact, now that I'm thinking about it, I might even consider getting rid of lazy up and just doing this kind of pattern everywhere, because the pattern is kind of simple. Once you get it down right, this might be able to be a reusable component. So here we're moving. You can see the items moving, and we can go back the other way too. And I'm going to go through how this works. So here is our infinite code, and this is the normal TMDB stuff at the top. But we have the view container, and we're not using row, we're not using column. We're just using a view, and we have custom on left, on right handlers to move items. And we have a list. So the list, again, I talked about in the previous video. List allows us to have item as a signal and the index as a signal. So now I'm setting the X position of each element based on the index that it is in the array. And what I did was, when the first item comes in the array, I actually add an empty item. So that way, the first item is at index 0, which sets it at -210. So it's off screen. And that gives us this pattern where when I press right, this is item 1, item 0 is off screen. So when I press right, it becomes item 0, which moves it -210 pixels off the screen. And then what's happening is when I press right again, that item that is at item 0 actually goes to the end of the index. So list reuses it and puts it off screen over here, and then starts bringing it back in the screen. And in order to show that, what we can do is I can go up here and just change the display size to be only, let's say, 5 items. And so now we have 5 items on the screen, and you'll see it adds an item, and that item is the item that goes, or that's off screen here. It's just moving over there and being added in and fading back in. So it's a pretty cool effect. And if we go the other way, there's an item over here that's fading out and going over here. All right. So the way that this works, is if you go full screen, items are off the screen, which is okay. You just have extra items, but that allows you to have that animation effect. And this item just automatically jumps to the other end of the row. And all that's happening is just this calculations, which is setting every element position based on where it is in the array. And so what happens is when you press on right, we do shift right here, which this is again just very prototypey, very basic functionality. All this is doing is it's checking to make sure we're not out of bounds in the array, and it's setting the current index +1. And then we set focus on element 2 in the array. and we update the display items, which essentially just goes through all the items and sets the display items to a slice. So the list always has an array of 0 to end items, which is 0 plus 5 plus buffer size 7 items. So there's only 7 items ever inside of list, and it's just reusing those items over and over again. So hopefully that all makes sense. And so all we're doing is updating the current index, calling update display items, which is just changing the values in the array. So the array is always 7 items, and all we're doing is shifting them one to the left or one to the right. And by changing their position in the array, the list updates, and it says your new position is here, your new position is here. And what we can do is we can probably see that if I go in here and I do that set property trick here. So I add a log point, name value, and we clear this. And we press right. We can see this is the new poster being added that's getting all these properties set, but all the other elements are just updating their X value. So it allows them all to shift, and the one new one that got added is updating all the properties. All right, so I think that's a pretty cool trick. Hopefully that's clear in how it works. Now I'm going to show you another interesting tidbit on this. So the next piece is, what happens if you had to like change channels? And so let's imagine this is a TV grid, and we have an array of shows that are on TV, and you want to press up and down to change channels. So what I'm doing is now if I press up, we can see it's actually loading a whole nother list. And all I'm doing, now this is actually, there's probably a better way of doing this, but this is, again, my first iteration prototype, is I'm using on create and on destroy, which will recreate this every time, which probably isn't performant enough to do the animation. So there's probably a better way that I'm going to explore next, which is doing the same thing of just having 3 lists or 3 of these, one that's above, one that's below. Actually, you might be able to get away with just one additional one. Well, actually, no, you need to know whether they're going up or down on the channel. So you would pre-create those, and then if they press up or down, you would animate it in or out in the direction. And you wouldn't even really have to animate it. You'd probably just update this one to be a different channel, and the one above it would be channel 0, channel 1, and then the one below is channel 2. And all you're doing, again, is just changing the data source, and things are just kind of magically happening, right? Properties are updating, and the UI is updating based on the data source. Okay, so sorry about that. I have a cold, so I'm taking lots of breaks so that my throat doesn't tickle too much. But I think that answers, or at least is all the pieces that I wanted to cover in this video. If there's any questions, feel free to leave comments. But this took me a little time to do it. It's not perfect yet, but there's definitely more that I want to do to enhance this. And if somebody wants to contribute a primitive, a solid primitive, I mean, this is probably the next good one to add, because I don't think it would be too difficult to kind of make this a reusable component. We already have the list component, so we kind of have to combine some of the stuff that LazyUp does with this concept. All right, that's all I have for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and like, thumbs up, subscribe, and see you on the next one.